Hey, welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Wednesday Wisdom on the Educational AD Podcast. We'll be right back with Misty Buck, but first, let's hear from our podcast sponsors. We want to say thanks to Final Forms for their support of Wednesday Wisdom. Final Forms is the industry leader in forms and registration, but Final Forms is a lot more than that. Final Forms is a team, it's technology, and it provides schools with compliance, communication, and risk management solutions. Final Forms can help your stakeholders with mobile accessibility. It has reminders for parents about policies, about physicals, and all the forms that go with athletics. Final Forms can help with team communication, with attendance, and even certification management for coaches. And for athletic directors, Final Forms can help with eligibility, with rosters, and all the reports that come across your desk. And it does this using secure language translation and ADA compliance. You know, it's time for you to talk to a team that's walked in your shoes. To take the next steps, find out what Final Forms can do for you, go to finalforms.com/Jake. One more time, that's finalforms.com/Jake to get started with Final Forms. We also want to say thanks to Huddle. Remember, at Huddle, we power sports. Over 200,000 teams, including some of the best in the world, use Huddle to help their teams using video and analytics. Huddle's the complete performance platform. They have online tools, mobile and desktop apps, smart cameras like the Huddle Focus. There's always been analytics, but there's a whole lot more. Huddle's also built for every level, from club and youth teams all the way through high schools and colleges, and even the pros use Huddle to help their athletes perform at the highest level. You're in pretty good company with over 6 million users, including your student athletes and the coaches of the teams you're trying to get to recruit them. If you want to find out more about what Huddle can do for you and your program and how your school can become a Huddle school, go to huddle.com and talk to their professionals. Remember, at Huddle, we power sports. We also want to say thanks to Athletic Surveys by LifeTrack. Athletic Surveys by LifeTrack are a quick, easy, and affordable way for you to collect comprehensive data that allows you to evaluate and improve your entire athletic program. Athletic Surveys by LifeTrack also connects you with the 95% of the parents and the student athletes that really love your program, and it gives them a voice to help demonstrate the importance that a positive athletic experience has for them. Go to athleticsurveys.com and check out their testimonials, and then give them a call at 1-800-738-6466, or you can email them at info@athleticsurveys.com to get started. If you've never used a survey to take the pulse of your student athletes or your parents, you're really missing out. Talk to the folks at Athletic Surveys by LifeTrack and let them help you take your athletic program from good to great. We also want to say thank you to Sideline Interactive. Their indoor scoring tables and video boards can generate $10,000 or more every year, while also creating the ultimate game day experience for your athletes. Go to sidelineinteractive.com or call 832-786-0302 to schedule a live web demo and see their tables and boards in action. You can also email them at sales@sidelineinteractive.com and see exactly what these fantastic products can do for you. That's sales@sidelineinteractive.com. We also want to thank Wall of Fame by Vital Signs. You know, they're on a mission to bring your school's legacy to life. They've got a variety of interactive touchscreen video consoles and an entire library of templates to help recognize the athletic achievements of your students, both past and present. Let them help you showcase your school's diverse history and your proudest moments by going to vitalsignswalloffame.com. You can also call them at 614-981-3589 or email them at sales@vitalsignswalloffame.com. That's sales@vitalsignswalloffame.com. And we want to say thanks to Hometown Ticketing, the leading digital ticketing provider to schools and colleges. You can find out more about what Hometown Ticketing can do for you and your school by going to hometownticketing.com and talk to their experts. Hometown Ticketing, simple and easy online ticketing. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Wednesday Wisdom. This time we're visiting with one of our regulars, Misty Buck. She is just so many things. She's a professional, mental health coach. She's an author, the Athlete Mental Health Playbook. She's a blogger. She's a writer. She's a speaker. She's a TV host. She does it all, and we're very fortunate to have her part of our team. Misty Buck, welcome back to Wednesday Wisdom.
Oh my God. Thank you so much for having me again. I don't know why you guys keep wanting to hear from me, but I'm happy to continue to show up.
For those of you that might be first-time listeners, or you haven't, if Misty Buck's name is not familiar with you, I really encourage you to go to LinkedIn and look at the things that she does. She is being very, very modest. She is impactful on a number of levels. And again, we're very fortunate to have her, but let's go and dive in. We were talking before we started recording about athletes, and I'm probably going to butcher this, but learning to manage or control their emotions. What do you have for us on that topic?
Yeah, so that's a really big topic, right? And I think the reason this is really important is because when you take a step back and you look at this, emotional intelligence, emotions, and all those kind of things, I think a lot of people just take for granted that we have emotions and we know what they are and we're in touch with them, because it's as much as part of life as breathing, right? Because it's just part of being human. It exists. It's part of the experience. But I think that I kind of draw this analogy of like, it's like breathing, you don't really think about it. It's just there. But like, if you were to have a problem breathing, you would immediately notice and do something about it, right? Whereas your emotions, it's a lot easier to bury that down. It's a lot easier to hide it. You may not even realize what's going on. And a lot of that is due to, first and foremost, developing emotional intelligence. And a piece of that is understanding what you're feeling and when you're feeling it, and being able to, here's a key, name your emotions. I think not many people are taught how to do that. It's not taught for the most part, locker rooms. It's not really taught in schools. It's not even taught in a lot of homes, because again, we're all just kind of like going about our business. And it's not like, let's talk about what that feeling really is, right? Like, who takes the time to do that? So not many of us, if we're being honest. So I think that's the big piece is first, before you can manage your emotions, you need to understand what they are and be able to get comfortable with them, name them, know what pushes those buttons, and know what they feel like, so that then you know how to proceed with managing them better.
Yeah. Well, let's go and jump right in with both feet and see what happens here. As going through my career as, right out of college, teaching, coaching, becoming a head coach way before I was ready to be a head coach. That expression, you don't know what you don't know, certainly applied to me. Learning, getting a little bit smarter, then becoming an athletic director, and, making those rookie AD mistakes. And finally, by the time I'm in my 40th or 41st year, I think I've got a pretty good handle on things. So, but going back to this idea of emotions, as a young coach, and even maybe as an older coach, I think I did a pretty good job. But there were also moments, I can see them, and certainly my former athletes can tell you about them, where, my emotions were, out of control for an event. A play happens, a referee, you name it. And as coaches, we would always tell our kids, don't worry about it, forget about it, move on to the next play. But as the leader, in this case, I wasn't modeling, that best behavior. So let's take that coach of, maybe 5-6 years. They're not a rookie, but they've been involved for a while. What's a process for them? How can they do a better job coaching their kids and a better job of coaching themselves by getting a handle on their emotions? I know that's a very simplistic question, but can you help us?
Can you help me? So, I love this. I love this topic. And I think the place to start is before you can help your players, you have to first understand yourself, where you're at, and to your point, how to manage those emotions. Because when you model that, right, your players are going to pick up on that way more. So we know, like growing up, like your parents do as I say, not as I do. And you're like, yeah, like that. How well did that ever work? So when you're able to model these things, so even when we get back to when we talk about things like self-care and we talk about things like opening up and asking for help, when we talk about things like why are kids having such a hard time with making mistakes, there's not one place of blame, certainly. But I think it's important to take a look and say, for example, can I admit when I made a mistake? Right. And that's tough for a coach because you got to lead the team. You don't want them questioning you, right? Like there's all these different things that come into that. But can you, in significant moments, say, you know what, like for instance, that momentum swing at the end of the quarter was my fault because I didn't call the right plays. Something like that, right? Just for an example. So that then it's okay for your players to understand, oh, you know what, like I'm not perfect either, right? It gives them permission to do that. And I think the same thing goes for your emotions. So what does that mean? Does that mean you have to be emotionless? Absolutely not. You're not a robot, plain and simple, right? So but if you're somebody who, like, I'm visualizing my dad right now, used to like take his hat off. This was his famous thing, and throw it on the ground. Like we would just wait for him to do that every game because he just would be so passionate, right? It was like this awesome thing to watch. But I think if you could really find a way to, again, to model and use tools to help yourself be like, okay, I'm upset right now. I'm mad. I don't like that call, for example. And I'm going to let the ref know about it. But then I'm going to come back to my team and be like, all right, you know what? Like, I don't like the way that this happened, but I'm not going to let that get me out of my game as a coach. So let's take a couple deep breaths right here. Let's regroup and let's focus and center on what our job is right now. So I think like that's kind of an example in game. How realistic is that? I don't know, depending on your individual circumstances, but it takes practice, right? I'm a big fan of mindfulness. I'm a big fan of meditation. You have to train for these things the way that you train to learn plays, the way that you train to like run faster, to do all these other things. You have your mind is just this huge muscle that we neglect and we don't train, but you can train yourself again to understand your emotions, hear your emotions, and learn how to pause before you react. And that doesn't just happen like this. I mean, you got to train it and you got to work at it.
Yeah, I mean, as I was listening to you, I was thinking back to my transition from coaching to being an AD, and now as an athletic director, I'm seeing coaches run the gamut of the emotional response. Calm and controlled. Very mindful to clones of me, that would explode and yell and scream. Probably when they shouldn't. And nothing annoys you more than someone that reminds you of yourself. And so,
why is that so true? It's so true.
So I remember, over the years, working with coaches and just, say, hey, when that happens, you just got to move on, next play. And particularly in football, I'd be down the sidelines, just kind of lurking in the background. And if that moment came up and, maybe, hey, referee or something like that, I would just say, hey, move on, next play.
Yeah.
And then we talk
like
about it after the game in a very positive way. And I'd say, hey, you really did a good job, moving on. And remember, the assistant coaches, they're watching you, the kids are watching you, and had some good success with that in kind of that, sage mentor on the sidelines. But I'm intrigued by, what you talked about, the meditation and, mindfulness exercises. Even at this stage in my career / life, haven't been able and really haven't tried to embrace those activities, which would probably be very helpful. So what's a good entry level mindfulness activity that not me, but a cynical coach who's listening right now could embrace and hopefully make themselves better, including me.
Including you. So the first place that I always that I always suggest beginning is there is a book. It is called The Mindful Athlete, written by George Mumford. I don't remember if I've ever shared it on your show before. I actually have a copy right here. I keep it nearby. So he is an amazing individual. He was roommates with Dr. J in college and when he played basketball, and went through his own journey and eventually like hit rock bottom, found mindfulness, and through, not on purpose, it just sort of is how things happened for him, was introduced to Phil Jackson, and then he brought mindfulness to the Lakers, to Kobe. He worked very closely with Kobe. He worked with the Bulls, sorry. He worked with the Bulls with Jordan, with Phil Jackson, and then later with the Lakers and Kobe, and some of these other major athletes, and teaching them how to use mindfulness for performance. So if mindfulness and meditation and all these things are they seem woo-woo to you, and they seem like tree huggers or whatever you want to call it.
Love that expression.
I don't know what you're talking about at all. So I've never thought that in my life. So I encourage you to check out that book, because it takes the concepts of mindfulness into, which we think often is just being present, and actually it's being present, but the layers to get there are deep, right? So like we talk about things, for example, like right effort, like right speech, about those kind of things, staying in growth mode versus survival mode. So these are all things that he goes over in the book. And I think it's just a phenomenal way to begin, because from a sports perspective, it breaks this stuff down so that it helps with performance. But you'll see really that performance begins with your ability to manage your mindset.
Okay, very cool. You did see me writing that down. George Mumford, The Mindful Athlete. Will be my
Look
next.
him up. He's phenomenal. I've been enrolled in his course for some time, and I've been fortunate enough to have a one-on-one conversation with him, and he just really he puts it in a way that's not like, it's just really simple, in other words, and it really relates to people, I think, in the sports world, just using that language and in a way that I think makes a lot of sense. So I always suggest starting with that, especially if you're in the sports world and maybe you're a little resistant to some of these things. You can approach it from a performance standpoint and begin to understand how this makes sense, and how these like big time, hugely successful athletes have used these programs.
No, absolutely. Appreciate the tip. We're going to take a quick break again for our listeners. We're visiting with Misty Buck, one of our regulars on Wednesday Wisdom. We'll be back with some more wisdom, but first, let's hear from a couple of our sponsors. This is the Educational AD Podcast. We want to thank Huddle for their support of Wednesday Wisdom and the podcast. Huddle has over 200,000 teams, including some of the best in the world, that use video and analytics to help their teams play better. Huddle's the complete performance platform. They have online tools. They have smart cameras like the Huddle Focus. There's always been analytics, but there's a whole lot more. Huddle is also built for every level of play, from club and youth teams all the way through high schools and colleges, and even the pros use Huddle to help their athletes perform at the highest level. You're in pretty good company with over 6 million users, including your student athletes and the coaches of the teams you're trying to get to recruit them. If you want to find out more about what Huddle can do for you and your program, and how your school can become a Huddle school, go to huddle.com and talk to their professionals. Remember, at Huddle, we power sports. Hey, welcome back, everyone. We're visiting today with Misty Buck, author, blogger, and just mental health, mental fitness professional. Misty, for a new listener, walk them through just a little bit of your background as an athlete, as a coach, your first book, and then I'm excited to hear about your second book. So I'm going to shut up and let's hear about Misty Buck.
Yeah. Let's do the Cliff's Notes version, shall we? So basically my background is, I grew up in youth sports. I was a cheerleader and I later coached cheerleading. My dad was a football coach. My brother was a football player. We also did roller hockey here in Miami. This was like one ice rink. So in the off season, it was roller hockey. So I always grew up in this environment of sports, of being at the field, and of a lot of this ideology of competitiveness and these really awesome things that I've taken with me throughout my life, that you learn by being a part of a team, and you learn by pushing past your limits to see what you can do in sports, right? But I also learned these ideas that, this was in the 90s. So it was very much, when it came to emotions, walk it off, don't be weak, don't be soft, all these other things. And that was all well and fine, except that I was a really sensitive kid to begin with. So I'm hearing these things and I'm always constantly in the back of my head, I'm thinking, God, I'm not like the other kids. What's wrong with me? Why do I cry? Like, why do I feel so much? Right? Like, I just sort of always had this thing where I never really quite felt like I fit in. And then in high school, went through some hard times and suffered with depression, including wanting to end my life. And luckily was able to get the right kind of help at just the right time with that. And later into my adult life, realized I also was dealing with anxiety. I never even knew what that was. I didn't know why I would wake up in college with stomach aches until years after college. I learned that was anxiety. So anyway, so that was sort of my path. And I started my first business. It's a marketing business. I still own and operate that today. We specialize in digital marketing, social media marketing. I opened that in January 2008. And I was 26 and I was like, oh, I'm so smart, I can have a business. And so I opened this business. And several years into it, I thought, you know what, I miss, actually while I was getting the business started, I worked as a recovery coach at a residential treatment center for women who were in recovery from eating disorders. And so I did that for about a year. And as the time went on with until I decided to put more into the marketing business. Anyways, time went on, I was like, man, I really loved coaching and cheerleading. I really loved coaching these young women as a recovery coach. And so I decided to get certified as a life coach. And that led me to pick my niche, because they're always saying, who do you want to help? Pick your niche, right? It can get like a lot of pressure. Who's your audience? So after kind of going back and forth on some things, I was working with a coach myself, and he was like, Misty, what are the things that impacted you the most? And I was like, well, I loved being a coach and coaching cheerleading and being a part of sports. And I love that world. And the toughest thing I ever overcame has been my battles with mental health. So gosh, why don't I put those two things together and help people? So like in 2017, I started a blog and focusing on helping athletes with their mental health. And that blog became a book, the Athlete Mental Health Playbook, which was published in 2020. And then I also was very fortunate last year to, I guess for lack of a better word, team up with the Hall of Fame Health Program under the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And I'm now a coach and contributor with them as well. So I help contribute content to their website, and I'm listed as a coach with them. And that's been super awesome to be a part of that community and really helping to break some of the stigma by just sharing these messages. So in a nutshell, I know it's kind of a big nutshell, but in a nutshell, that was how I got to where I am now. I'm on my background and my credentials. So, and I am working on my next book, and my next book is sort of going to be a hybrid of these different experiences as well. I just was speaking with somebody in a different interview yesterday, and they were like, oh, the marketing business or the coaching business, which if you had to give one up, what would you give up? And I was like, you know what, they actually run pretty parallel the more time I spend in both of them, because mindset is so much about marketing And then, on the mental health and the other stuff, or helping somebody build their business as a coach and consultant, the mindset stuff always comes into that as well. So in my next book, which I hope will be out later this year, fingers crossed, I literally just started writing it though. It's going to be, it's tentatively titled The Athlete Branding Blueprint. And the idea behind that one is I'm going to put together a guide on branding and marketing, but in a way that really digs into the mindset of building an authentic brand, but also how do you get past things like thought blocks, imposter syndrome? How do you get past some of those fears that come with that, and managing expectations? But then at the same time, how do you build a brand that's really real and that really matches who you are? And I think that's, especially with the NIL stuff, I think that's becoming more and more significant. And that ties into mental health, because I'll give you an example. I spoke with a former athlete of a D1 football program, and he told me his life was sort of like in shambles at that point. He just had made all these really poor choices. And upon reflection, he realized part of the reason that he's taking personal responsibility as well, but he realizes that part of the reason he got himself into that position is because he felt like he had to be this character of whoever people expected him to be as a star D1 football player at this major program. And that was sort of a downfall, right? So that's part of this too, is how do you be more who you are instead of necessarily who others people expect you to be, and understanding that the right opportunities and the right people are going to align with you. You don't have to be who everybody expects you to be if that's not really aligned with who you are.
No, absolutely. And we always read or hear about, the former, professional or Olympic athlete that's no longer, able to perform at that level, and, some of their challenges transitioning. That's 98% of our high school kids that don't go on to college, and, they don't all have challenges transitioning, but I think it's something that very much, would add to a coach's knowledge. So, excited to see that book come out. Really enjoyed your first one and all the things you do. If one of our listeners wanted to reach out and pick your brain a little bit, find out more, where can they find out more about Misty Buck?
The easiest, I have websites, I can give those out. The easiest way to reach me though is just through social media. So I'm most active on Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn. I'm dabbling in TikTok, but I'm most often on Instagram or Twitter or LinkedIn. And so on Instagram and LinkedIn, on Instagram and Twitter, it's the Misty Buck. And on LinkedIn, you just look up, Misty Buck in Miami. There's other Misty Bucks, believe it or not. So look for the one in the Miami area. And that's me, or you can email me at misty@purposesoul, SOUL, athletics.com.
Okay. And again, she is very active on Twitter and LinkedIn, check it out. Misty Buck, thanks so much for being a part of Wednesday Wisdom.
Yeah. Thanks again for having me. I hope to come back again soon. You guys are awesome.
Oh, absolutely. For listeners, remember the Zoom recordings of all of our interviews get uploaded to the Educational AD Podcast YouTube channel. We appreciate you listening today. Come back again next Wednesday for more Wednesday Wisdom, and just about every day for the Educational AD Podcast. We'll see you next time. We want to thank all of our sponsors that make this possible. Final Forms, the industry leader in forms. Go to finalforms.com/Jake to find out how they can help you. Sideline Interactive, indoor scoring tables and video boards. Go to sidelineinteractive.com. We have a Sideline Interactive video board or score table, in our gym, and it is fantastic. It's one of the best purchases I ever made as an AD. Huddle, of course, is a football coach. I used Huddle as an athletic director. We were a Huddle school, and all of our teams used Huddle. Great product. Go to huddle.com for more information. Wall of Fame by Vital Signs. Our state association, the FIAAA, has a Wall of Fame console for our organization's Hall of Fame, and it really is impressive. You need to talk to these folks and let them put together a plan for you and your school. Hometown ticketing, of course, simple and easy online ticketing. Go to hometownticketing.com. We have Jessica Upchurch with What's Up, telling us all about what hometown ticketing can do for you and your program. And athletic surveys by Life Track. If you're not surveying your students and your parents, you're really missing out on a great resource. Go to athleticsurveys.com, find out what they can do for you. Once again, we appreciate you tuning in to Wednesday Wisdom on the Educational AD Podcast. We'll see you next time.